Hi, so this is my turn to give you a book and to read it, and the book I'm currently reading is this one called The Order of the Day, and by a Frenchman, Vuillard. It's describing the events that lead to World War II, specifically the Anschluss, where Germany unites with Austria and form a great country that they shouldn't have done after World War One. And it's a satirical comedy. It's basically making fun of just how ridiculous World War II is, and that really it shouldn't have happened on Germany's part, on Austria's part, on Britain's part, and it's all a bit tongue-in-cheek. So the chapter I've got up to is wiretaps. You can see it's not a very thick book, so I guess I'll get started and read you some. On the 13th of March, the day after the Anschluss, the British Secret Service intercepted a curious telephone farce between England and Germany. Mr. Ribbentrop, complained Göring, who was looking after the Reich while Hitler flew back to his homeland. The story about having given an ultimatum to Austria is, of course, nonsense. Schuschnigg is lying. It was Seyss-Inquart, brought to power by popular demand, who asked us to send troops. If you'd known how brutal the Schuschnigg regime had been, and Ribbentrop came back with, that's incredible. Why, the whole world must know of this. The conversation continued in this vein for a good half an hour, and we can only imagine the faces of those who were jotting down those peculiar statements and who must have felt like they were standing backstage at a theatre. Then the dialogue ended. Göring spoke of the lovely weather, the blue sky, the twittering birds. He was standing on his balcony, he said, and listening to the radio, to the enthusiasm of the Austrians. "Oh, that is marvellous," exclaimed Ribbentrop. 7 years later, on the 29th of November 1945, the same dialogue was heard. The same words, perhaps a bit less hesitant, more written out, but exactly the same casual phrases and sense of mockery. This took place at the International Military Tribunal in Nuremberg. The American prosecutor, Sidney S. Alderman, to buttress his indictment of the crimes against peace, pulled a sheaf of papers from his folder. The conversation between Ribbentrop and Göring seemed very illuminating to him. They used a kind of double talk, he said, intended to mislead other nations. Alderman then began to read. He read the little dialogue as one might read the lines of a play. So much so that when he spoke Göring's name as a character in the script, the real Göring's seat in the dock began to rise. But as soon as he realised he was not being called, that he was simply going to play his part right there in front of him, and read out his tirades in a heavy, monotonous tone. Alderman recited, "Göring, you know already that the Fuhrer has charged me with the running of this government, and I thought I would ring you and give you all the necessary information. The jubilation in Austria is indescribable. You can hear that on the radio." Ribbentrop, "Yes, it is fantastic, isn't it?" Göring, Seyss-Inquart, who at this time was already in charge of the government, asked us to invade immediately. We were already at the border when our troops, because we could not know in advance whether there will be a civil war or not, you see. So really, they're pretending. And we're describing now in hindsight that they were saying all this knowing that one day they might pick this up. What Göring didn't know at the time, on the 13th of March 1938, was that one day someone would get hold of more truthful exchanges. He had asked his own secretaries to take down his significant conversations. It was important that someday history should inherit them. Who knows, perhaps in his old age he'd write his own Gallic Wars, and he would base it on the notes taken on the fly at major moments in his career. What he didn't predict was that those notes, instead of sitting in his desk drawer after his retirement, would end up in the hands of a prosecutor at Nuremberg. And so we can hear other scenes, those played out between Berlin and Vienna 2 days earlier, on the night of the 11th of March, when he thought no one was listening but Seyss-Inquart, or Dobromski of the German embassy in Vienna, who acted as a go-between, and of course, the person who was taking down the momentous conversations for prosperity. He didn't know that in reality, the whole world was listening in, maybe not while he was actually speaking, but from the future, from the very propensity he had in mind. That's the way it is. All the conversations Göring held that evening were scrupulously archived and available. Miraculously, the bombs spared them. Now, what we find is in these personal notes, and what we comment on later, is that these two people, Göring and Ribbentrop, is that they have planned and made this whole invasion to their benefits. And where they thought one day they could talk about this in the success and in celebration, it gets used against them in courts. And in the end, they get picked up on this, and we know that these two men die for what they say about Austria. And it goes on to say that these two men, for their own benefits, caused the suffering and death of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So we've got a few more pages. It keeps on going. It's a really good book, and it's something that, even though it sounds like fiction, it sounds like a story, is the true events of what happened in World War II. So hopefully, the order of the day, Eric Vuillard's, it could be something you could read and learn, especially if you go on to do GCSE history.